Welcome to the channel. Here, we bring stories to life, tales that inspire, touch the heart, and sometimes challenge the mind. If you love powerful storytelling and short films that keep you thinking long after they end, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin today's journey. The mansion rose from the earth like a monument to pride, its walls dressed in marble, its gates crowned with iron and gold. Servants polished those gates every morning until they gleamed like fire under the sun, though no one inside ever looked twice at them. For Lady Amara, mistress of the house, such things were not for admiration, they were symbols. Proof of her power. Shields against the world beyond. To her, the city outside was filth, crowded markets, barefoot children, desperate hands. She despised it, all of it. Since her husband's death, her contempt for anything below her standards had only hardened. She wore her grief not as weakness but as armor, shaping it into arrogance and rules. She moved through the mansion like a queen of glass, untouchable, dressed in silks even when no one watched. To her, pride was survival, and wealth was both her sword and shield. Her only son, Daniel, lived in this fortress of perfection like a caged bird. At 10 years old, his days were carved into strict schedules: mathematics at dawn, piano in the afternoon, French verbs in the evening. Tutors cycled in and out, their voices flat and rehearsed, but none ever touched the quiet longing in his heart. He obeyed his mother, but laughter was rare on his lips. The boy carried the memory of his father's warmth like a fading lantern, and the cold order of the mansion smothered what light remained. To Lady Amara, he was the heir to her husband's name, the promise of legacy polished to shine. To Daniel, he was a prisoner behind golden bars. It happened one quiet afternoon. His tutor droned on about Latin declensions, his voice dull as dust. Daniel stared through the tall window, where the air outside shimmered with freedom, the cries of vendors, the rustle of trees, the laughter of unseen children. He excused himself politely, his tutor barely noticing, and slipped through the mansion halls. His bare feet carried him farther than he had ever dared, down into the back gardens, past the hedges trimmed like soldiers, until he reached the great golden gates that sealed him from the world. And there he saw him. The boy sat on the curb, barefoot, his clothes torn and clinging to his thin frame. His skin was darkened by the sun, his hair tangled, his body worn by hunger. Yet he was not idle. With a broken stick, he scratched numbers into the dirt, his lips moving as though he was speaking to invisible teachers. When Daniel stepped closer, the boy's eyes lifted, sharp, alive, defiant. They were not the eyes of someone beaten, though the world had surely tried. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, his voice small but steady. The boy shrugged lightly, not embarrassed, not apologetic. "Solving," he said. "Numbers don't lie. They don't change, even when people do." Daniel blinked, stunned by the strange wisdom in his tone. Tutors had spoken of numbers, yes, but never like this, never with such certainty, such passion, as though numbers were not facts but friends, steady and loyal when the world was not. Slowly, Daniel crouched beside him, unbothered by the dirt that would stain his fine trousers. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, his stick pausing in the dirt, then said, "Chica." The name was short, sharp, but it carried something heavy behind it, a shadow Daniel could not yet understand. And for the first time in years, Daniel laughed, a small, startled laugh that slipped out without permission. Above them, behind a tall window, Lady Amara watched. Her son knelt in the dust, shoulder to shoulder with a barefoot stranger, joy breaking across his face. But she saw no joy. She saw disgrace. Pride curdled into fury, her breath catching as though the sight itself poisoned her. In her world, there was no room for cracks in the glass, no place for filth at her gates. Already she felt the storm rising in her chest, sharp and merciless. She would not allow it. Not this boy. Not ever. Lady Amara's fury erupted like thunder the morning after she first saw Daniel at the gates. She swept into the study with the force of a storm, her gown flowing behind her, her jewels clinking with every sharp step. The tutor, who had been droning on about maps and kingdoms, froze mid-sentence and scrambled to bow, his face pale with fear. But Amara's eyes were fixed on her son, cold and piercing, as though they could burn through him. Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. He had been lost in daydreams about Chica's lessons, the dirt and numbers, the laughter that had made him feel alive. Now he felt exposed, cornered. "What were you doing at the gates yesterday?" Her voice sliced through the silence, each word heavy with rage. Daniel's lips trembled, but he tried to sound calm. I was only curious, Mother. Amara's expression twisted into disdain. Curious? She snapped. Curious about dirt? Curious about filth? Do you think I raised you to kneel beside a beggar child like common trash? Her words struck Daniel harder than any slap could have. His throat tightened, but for the first time in his young life, defiance stirred in him. His fists clenched, his voice cracked but held steady as he whispered, "He is not trash." The tutor gasped, and even Lady Amara blinked in disbelief. No one had ever spoken against her pride, least of all Daniel. For a moment, the air between them grew sharp and dangerous. Then Amara's hand slammed against the desk, spilling ink across the polished wood. "Enough," she thundered. "You will never see that boy again. Guards will watch the gates. If he dares return, he will be driven away. Do you understand me?" Her words echoed like chains, binding Daniel's heart in grief. But later that night, when the mansion slept and silence filled the halls, Daniel's resolve grew stronger than fear. He would not obey. That night, Daniel crept barefoot through the silent mansion, his heart pounding as if it might give him away. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the old wood felt like betrayal. But he pressed on, clutching a small pouch of coins he had saved. The back gates loomed ahead, tall and dark beneath the moonlight, and there he saw him, Chica, curled against the iron bars, his frail body trembling with the cold. His clothes were nothing but rags, his arms wrapped tightly around himself as though to keep his bones from breaking. Daniel's chest ached at the sight. He rushed to him, kneeling in the dirt, and pressed the pouch into Chica's hands. "Here," he whispered. "For food." But Chica only stared at the coins, his dark eyes clouded with pain and shame. His fingers curled weakly around them, but then he shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Food disappears," he muttered. "Lessons stay." And with a stick, he began to draw in the dirt again, numbers and shapes illuminated by the moon. Daniel listened, wonder blooming inside him, but he also saw something new in Chica's face, a weight, a sorrow too heavy for a boy his age. When the numbers faded into silence, Daniel asked softly, "Why don't you go to school?" For a long moment, Chica said nothing. His eyes dropped, his shoulders slumped. Then, in a voice so low it almost broke, he whispered, "Because my father left me." The words struck Daniel with confusion. "Left you?" he asked. Chica nodded, his jaw tightening though his eyes shone with tears. "He gambled everything. Our home, our food. And when his debts came due, he ran. He left me with nothing. The school threw me out because I couldn't pay. Just like that, I was no one." Daniel felt his throat tighten with pity, but before he could speak, Chica's voice darkened, trembling with a pain that made Daniel's skin crawl. "But it wasn't just me he betrayed. It was your father, too." Daniel froze. His small body went rigid, his eyes wide with fear. What do you mean?" he stammered. Chica looked away, his face shadowed in the moonlight, his voice dropping to a bitter whisper. "My father worked for dangerous men. They forced him to betray secrets that led to your father's death. They killed him. It wasn't an accident." Daniel's breath came in gasps, his tears spilling freely. His world tilted, broken. The father he mourned, the man whose absence left a hole in his chest, had not been taken by fate but by betrayal. He wanted to recoil from Chica, to run from the blood that bound them. But when he saw the boy's trembling body, the shame etched into his face, Daniel felt something stronger than fear, compassion. Chica's voice cracked as he whispered, "I didn't choose him. Every day, I hate him. But I carry his curse. Your mother is right to keep me away." Daniel wiped his tears roughly, his voice burning with defiance. "No. You're not him. You're not your father. You're Chica. And you're my brother." At that, Chica broke, a single tear tracing his cheek. Under the cold moonlight, in secret defiance of Lady Amara's pride, two boys sealed a bond that would change everything. Lady Amara sat alone in her chamber that night, the silence pressing on her like a weight she could no longer bear. The room was vast, its walls lined with portraits of her ancestors, men and women who seemed to glare at her from gilded frames, their faces stern, their eyes cold with judgment. Her husband's portrait hung above the fireplace, his painted eyes warm and steady, a reminder of the love she once knew before pride consumed her. For years, She had told herself that pride was the only thing that kept her alive after he was taken from her. But tonight, that armor felt heavy, almost suffocating. Her son's words echoed in her mind. He makes me happy. She had not heard that word from Daniel's lips since the funeral. The thought clawed at her, tearing holes in the fortress she had built. Happiness. Could a boy from the streets, a child she deemed filth, truly give Daniel what wealth and perfection had not? She wanted to dismiss it, to bury the thought as she always did. But when the servants whispered that Daniel had slipped from his room again, the rage she expected did not come. Instead, something unfamiliar gripped her chest, fear. She rose at once, her silk gown swishing as she strode through the halls, her heart pounding against her ribs. Outside, under the cold gaze of the moon, she found the back gates open and shadows moving just beyond. And there, she saw them, Daniel kneeling on the ground, his arms wrapped around the ragged boy she despised. Her breath caught. She should have shouted, should have dragged her son away. But she did not. Something in the sight froze her where she stood. Her son clung to the boy as though to life itself. His sobs broke the silence, raw and desperate, the kind she had not heard since the day he lost his father. Daniel's small frame shook as he pressed his face into Chica's shoulder. The ragged boy was trembling too, not from tears but from hunger, his thin arms barely strong enough to hold himself upright. "You're my brother," Daniel whispered fiercely, his words sharp with defiance. "Not trash. Not a curse. My brother." Lady Amara staggered, the words slicing through her heart. For years, she had tried to mold her son into perfection, but in this moment, she realized she had only caged him in grief. He was starving not for lessons or riches but for connection, for love. And it was not her who had given it to him. It was this boy. She stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the stones, and the two boys looked up at her with fear in their eyes. Daniel's cheeks were wet with tears, his body stiff as though bracing for punishment. Chica's gaze was lower, his body tensed for rejection, his eyes already dim with the certainty of being cast aside. Lady Amara knelt slowly before them, the cold stones biting into her knees, her silks pooling around her. The gesture shocked them both. She had never bowed before anyone. Her voice trembled as she spoke, "Chica." The boy flinched at the sound of his name on her lips. "You will not sleep on these streets again," she whispered, her throat tight. Daniel's eyes widened. "Mother," he breathed, disbelief in his voice. Lady Amara swallowed hard, her pride shattering piece by piece. "You will come into my house," she said, her words firm yet heavy with emotion. "Not as a servant. Not as charity. But as family. As my son. As your brother." For a long, fragile moment, the night held its breath. Chica's eyes widened, tears spilling down his cheeks despite his effort to hide them. He shook his head in disbelief, his voice breaking. "Why? Why would you take me in? After everything my father did. After the blood I carry." Lady Amara's eyes glistened, her voice softening with a vulnerability she had buried for years. "Because I see now. Pride cannot raise a child. Pride cannot heal grief. Love can. And if I do not choose love, then I will lose everything, even Daniel." She reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it gently on Chica's shoulder. The boy's breath hitched, his heart pounding wildly in his frail chest. Daniel let out a sob of relief and threw his arms around both of them, his small body shaking with joy. For the first time in years, Lady Amara allowed her tears to fall, hot and unashamed, onto the heads of the two boys who clung to her as though she were the only anchor in a cruel world. In that moment, the golden gates of the mansion were no longer walls but doors opening to something new. Yet in the city's shadows, unseen by them all, men stirred, the same men who had silenced her husband, who had fed off betrayal and blood. And now, a boy who carried their darkest secret had been welcomed into her house. Lady Amara did not yet know it, but in choosing love, she had also chosen war. Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. Your time and support mean the world, and it's what keeps this channel alive. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves good stories, and don't forget to subscribe so you can join us for the next one. Until then, stay inspired, stay creative, and keep the love for storytelling alive.